AI glitches. It doesn't give you the right information all the time. And that's one thing with directions, but imagine going into healthcare and having AI doing certain work for you, but outputting the wrong information. I mean, we're talking diagnoses, we're talking medication doses, we're talking treatment plans, everything. So it is the most high risk industry to have a company enter into.
Welcome to Inside Home Health. I'm Arvind Sareen, CEO of Copper Digital, and I'll be honest with you. Today's guest is someone I wanted to talk to precisely because she might challenge everything that we're building. Susie Branagan is a 25-year frontline nurse, a just culture expert who trained hundreds of hospital managers at Beth Israel Lahey Health, a former VP of clinical experience at Invisalert Solutions, where she helped deploy patient safety technology across healthcare systems. And now she's a founder and consulting with lots of companies. And her tagline says it all: AI's clinical conscience. Let me tell you why that phrase stopped me. At Copper Digital, we built AI voice agents for home health, clinical documentation, patient engagement, intake. And I'll admit something, it's easy in this industry to get excited about all the things that AI can do, but then you forget to ask what AI does to the people who have to use it. And Susie doesn't forget. She opened a brand new pediatric psychiatry unit and achieved 0 suicide attempts within 3 months. She was selected as one of roughly 46 fellows nationally by America's essential hospitals. She led her team through COVID with retention rates most hospitals would envy. And then she walked away from health tech to start a consulting practice focused on one question: why are we losing our best nurses? And what role does technology play in that? That question is uncomfortable. And I think the most important question anyone building for healthcare needs to sit with. So Susie, welcome. I'm ready. Challenge us.
All right. Thank you for having me. Thanks for all of the wonderful reminders of what I've done. I don't know. It's a lot, but I'm happy to be here today.
Wonderful. I'm so excited. And so you spent 25 years on the front line: ICU, med-surg, pediatric psychiatry, and then you opened a brand new psych unit where you achieved 0 suicide attempts, as I mentioned, in 3 months. And then you went into health tech. And then you left and started your own consulting practice. Walk me through what happened at each of those turns, and what did you see that made you sort of keep moving?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, I didn't open it. I helped to open and do the grand opening. I wish I had those skills, but there was an existing unit that was very old, and they wanted to rebuild and restructure and make it a lot more psych safe, ligature free, up to date type of thing. So we opened that brand new unit, and every patient had a private room, which is huge for psychiatric care. The previous unit and other units I've worked on, some kids and adults, they're in a double room with another patient, and that is just not good for recovery, safety, and things like that. So it was nice to have 24 beds where every child had their own really, really state-of-the-art, safe room, safe bathroom, things like that. And I credit Invisalert Solutions a lot to our success on the unit in terms of safety and being able to catch whether someone was having signs of possible self-harm or a suicide attempt, unfortunately. So with that product, we were able to use proximity-based monitoring, and staff could not fake a check. They had to go within a certain amount of feet from the patient for the iPad to even light up and let them do the check. So I was sleeping better at night knowing these kids are getting checked on for real. Like, people aren't just in the nurse's station saying, Charlie's fine, he's good to go. Unfortunately, I know that sounds awful, but people do that. And it's really not out of malice. It's out because of nurses and techs do not have time anymore. And that's what AI has been helping with. So we were successful. I owe a lot of the success to that product and having something that truly works. And the staff also felt like their workload was decreased because every time they went in that room, they were also able to identify unsafe items that may be in there. Whereas if you just did traditional rounding, some hospitals, people go to the door of the room and they're like, everything looks good, bye. You have to go in the room and look around in the environment, click off that the environment's safe. I mean, the number of self-harm type of items that we found in every 5 and 15-minute check were the reasons that we did not have many unsafe events happen on the unit. So loved my time there. And that was always my dream, was to manage child psychiatric patients, and the patients were just phenomenal. I didn't meet a patient that I didn't just fall in love with right away in terms of what their true character really was deep down inside. And every single one of them was just really struggling mentally. And my staff were great. I got to hire my own staff, which was amazing because I hire for heart and I make sure that, it's great that you have a 4.0 GPA and, you've been a charge nurse at 5 different hospitals and been doing this for 20 years. But I find the best staff are those that may not even have a master's or a bachelor's. I mean, my best employee ever was my clinical coordinator, which is like the secretary on units. And she graduated from high school and wasn't able to go to college for financial reasons. She's the best employee I've ever had. So I just really believe in hard work. You can teach people skills, but you really can't teach empathy. And we can get to that later because you kind of can teach trauma-informed language, but having that deep down inside, like natural ability to connect with patients doesn't come from being book smart. It's a heart thing. So that was wonderful. But then I had been doing managing for 14 years at that point. I had managed a medical surgical unit for a very long time before that. And I probably burnt out actually before the child unit, but I was adamant about doing this work. So I was there for a couple of years, and it was just the same thing, 24/7 management, always on call, always getting texts on the weekend and vacations and during dinner. And I never missed a call. I never not responded to my staff with empathy and a plan, but it wears on you. It wears on your family and your children and just your own personal life. So I decided, like, for my own mental health, to leave the bedside, like the hospital environment completely. And Invisalert, the company that we use their product on, there was an opportunity for me to work with them as a vice president of clinical experience and enterprise accounts. And I learned so much from working for this company because they really trusted my clinical judgment. I worked with another wonderful nurse, Mary Kay, for a while, just putting our heads together and everything. We really came up with some great stuff. And, speaking of nurses and AI, what I loved about Invisalert is like they had us on most of the demos. They had us going to the shows because when nurses walk up to a table at like a show or they're doing a demo, that's what they want to see, that an end user is using the product and loves it. No offense to the tech teams or engineers. They're brilliant in their own way, but they haven't been at the bedside and they haven't done that workload. So it was a great experience. I learned a lot about sales and marketing as well. So that is kind of where I was like, I could venture out and do kind of my own thing. And I had an opportunity to do that like last summer, and it's still growing, but now I have Susie Branagan Consulting, and I should have named it coaching too, because I do coach as well. And I won a scholarship from they've picked 85 people in the world this year. And I was one of them, and we have class every week now, and it's been wonderful. I've learned so much as well. So yeah, so here I am promoting nursing in AI tech and also supporting healthcare workers one-on-one who have gone through a lot of trauma and PTSD and burnout. I do wellness assessments first to see where they're at currently and then where we need them to be. Working with a couple of nurses right now that were me many years ago. And I'm like, you got to pause. Like, this is not good. We have to change something here. I mean, you shouldn't be hiding in your office because you're so burnt out and worried about micromanaging and everything. So yeah, so here I am now. Sorry, that was a little long, but
no, that's great. And that definitely a lot to unpack there. But I really like how you pick the nurses for heart instead of the 4.0 GPAs, or I love that. So then you would hire people with already having good empathy, and they would just really find that meaning and purpose, and they would genuinely want to help. And I think there's a lot more that you mentioned about how you became a part of the tech team. And I see a lot of the similarities of how we also were making some mistakes. And then once we got Kathy and Michael, they're our clinical advisors. Kathy's got 30 years of experience. She's fantastic. And she provides that perspective of that nurse that's just so beautiful. And she's awesome. And then, of course, Michael is just another level. He used to work at CMS. So no, I see that. And it wasn't until I realized I was at the NOC conference, and then I saw Kathy do a keynote, and this was the point that she was making. She was presenting on the future of the EMRs, and she was like, but the tech people that just go around and the nurses don't have a seat on the table. And I felt like I needed to do something. So right after the keynote, I spoke to her, and she's like, well, I'm going to go on a vacation for the next month, but then we connected after that. I followed up, and then I told her the vision and how I really wanted, to have people who actually cared about the nurse's experience. And that was great. So no, I can relate to that. And yes, it's really changed the perspective. In fact, our tech team just really loves having those discussions. And when I tell them, no, hey, we got to do it this way, they're like, no, we got to check with Kathy as well. And it just creates a beautiful culture there. So Thank you for sharing that. I think
3 and 4 heads are always better than one. The more people you have that are diverse experiences, you put an engineer, a tech person, a nurse in a room, it's amazing what you can come up with. So, yeah.
Right. And you have trained hundreds of managers, and I mean,
more
just
so
culture.
Staff, more so staff. So I did train managers within Leahy Health, a ton of them, but I also did training for all of the staff. So one thing that's important with Just Culture is the managers have to know what it is, obviously, because they're using the algorithm that is used. I don't have to get into what is Just Culture, but basically it's, a fair and just system to doing investigations when errors are made in healthcare or behaviors are not up to par. So it's the same algorithm for every employee. Everybody gets treated the same, and you just go through the algorithm. And so it was important to me that we also train the staff, because they need to know what we use to investigate and to look at systems and things like that. So yeah, I'd say it's hundreds overall, but not hundreds of managers yet. But within my company, I have done many training sessions. So I would say at this point, actually, you're probably right, because I did do a training with St. Anselm College, and there was, I think, 80 something nurse managers on that. And then I did do another talk. So you could be correct, but not at Leahy Health. I just wanted to correct that.
Understood. No, and thank you. I stand corrected. And I think I'm using, obviously, a lot of my AI agents to do the research and then consolidate all that and get some notes and prep for it. So it's possible.
Well, there
so thank
you go.
For correcting
Sometimes
me there.
they get it a little wrong, but that's all right. I don't want
to. They do.
Yeah.
And I think the one idea that you have talked about that stuck with me, and even our call to prep for this, was the idea that systems fail, not people. I mean, tell me a little bit more about that framework and what we should be thinking about in terms of AI in healthcare. Because, I mean, let me be honest, I feel like most of the AI companies are building tools that flag errors, but in a punitive culture, that flagging can become a weapon. And that's where I'd like to focus a little bit and sort of try to understand how should we, the tech folks, be thinking about this?
Sure. That's a wonderful question, because there's kind of many answers that all fall into the same category. So when you're creating these products, I actually just recently learned over the last year, because again, I'm a nurse, I'm a science person, I'm a people person. Tech is newer to me technically, and I didn't know what AI hallucinations were until recently, when I was talking to this wonderful company who is preparing to infiltrate the healthcare sector in a way where their product would detect hallucinations in AI, which I'm sure but not everybody knows means, say you say, I need directions to, Boston College, and you do it into Claude or something, right? And it could literally give you the wrong directions, but you're thinking, okay, this is AI. Obviously, they're right. AI glitches. It doesn't give you the right information all the time. And, that's one thing with directions. But imagine going into healthcare and having AI doing certain work for you, but outputting the wrong information. I mean, we're talking diagnoses, we're talking medication doses, we're talking treatment plans, everything. So it is the most high risk industry to have a company enter into. And that's why it's so important that healthcare people are on these teams, because we can say like, whoa, 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 no, you don't want to do that because, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, and then in terms of just culture, when it comes to, if there's an error because the nurse did something, but it was actually AI that told them to do the wrong thing, the hope would be that you would do a thorough investigation and look at the system, the AI system first, and not assume that the nurse just made a mistake in her own brain, right? And even if the nurse didn't do, or the doctor didn't do what was suggested or whatever, that's their own clinical judgment. So they also should not be held accountable for not going along with the treatment plan or the meds that are being recommended, because at the end of the day, they are the person in the care of that patient. But AI does have to be more accountable. There has to be safeguards in place. I personally would not want to work with a company as a manager that didn't have policies in place already within their company as to what happens when their product kind of outputted the wrong stuff, because otherwise it is going to fall back on the healthcare worker, because they have to blame someone. And I just know that on my units, I would never allow my team to get written up or reprimanded because of something that was confusing with an AI system. And again, nurses are not techie, right? Like some are. I should take that back. It wasn't. I'm much better now. But we want to be at the bedside. We want to be, giving care. So we need these systems to work for us and not hallucinate. And
let me address that for a second, because you make a very, very important point. So of course, AI hallucinations is a real challenge, and I don't know if we can completely solve entirely the hallucination problem. However, what we've been able to do is put human in the loop. And that human sometimes is even a doctor in a developing country who has a team of people that are reviewing every single sentence. And plus, again, we're doing documentation. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter if the documentation goes wrong, but of course, it's not like critical right there that we're going to consult AI and give some sort of advice for saving a patient's life. This is an OASIS, like outcome assessment information set, which is a complete assessment of the, socioeconomic and all the systems and the environment and the functional abilities. So that's what we're doing, and maybe it'll help. And I mean, I love it because that's what I wanted. I wanted to be challenged for what we're building. And I also want to make sure that I learn from it. So what we do is when there is this admissions assessment that needs to get done by a nurse, a home health nurse, we go in and the nurse can do an ambient scribe, but also nurse can finish the visit and speak the notes into the application. And that then converts it into mapping it for every single point. And there's like 120 items on OASIS, 23-page document. But in many of the EMRs, there are many more items, like over 1,000 items that need to be filled in. What we do is we first see what can be filled in. And then we look at what are some of the other essential items that should be filled in. And that's done by using additional questions that we put in front of the nurse that, can then tap. We also then reference it against the HNP, all the history that we're able to collect about the patient. And then we run multiple QA rules on it. Like if you said that the patient cannot ambulate 15 feet, then how are you saying that they could go and do X, Y, and Z? So, I mean, those types of checks are already there.
Yeah,
so I feel like,
yeah.
And I feel like it gives, even the nurses, like sometimes on a 23-page document, and, it's a very difficult to track, even if you're doing it in the EMR. So that was your first point. And then the second was building that culture where it's about giving benefit of the doubt. It's about really just understanding they all want to do a great job. And I feel like that's across the board in any type of company, and for leadership to always have. And I feel like, great leaders obviously always practice that, but there's always that balance as well, where you need to have certain boundaries and ensure that, of course, most nurses want to do a great job, but there are some situations where you may cut corners and you may skip, asking, let's say, the BIMS question, which is fine. Again, if you are able to assess the cognitive, we want to give that ability to the clinicians and always, of course, supporting them. But no, I get it. Of course, I wouldn't want my family to be treated by an AI or somebody who's just blindly following AI, or even putting the notes without having a human in the loop. And I think that's one lesson that across the board, all startups should take that are trying to innovate in this space.
Yeah, that's going to be the scariest thing is, I'm hoping that all of these things that are coming, into healthcare take into consideration, like really, really reiterating that, like, this product is here to help you and to help accelerate your care by being able to give you more time back at the bedside. At the end of the day, you are still, again, I'll keep honing in on it, like, you're still humanly responsible for that human being. And if you're not double checking the work and you're just signing off on a note or signing off on whatever, you could be making a decision that's literally life or death. And that is where that's kind of considered in just culture or reckless behavior. If I had a nurse that was just checking everything off, not rereading it, not proofreading it, not making sure that what it suggested actually even makes sense, we would be talking about kind of blatant workarounds and go through a coaching, go through re-education, or believe in letting anybody go over like one thing. But it's also, just culture talks about repetitive behavior as well. So if you have someone who continuously is bypassing the safeguards and just kind of winging it and pressing enter, yes, I approve, without reading it.
Or WNL within normal limits. That's, in our documentation space at least.
Yeah.
So you could just do WNL and then that just checks that, okay, everything's in normal limits. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad. Like you're correct that most people come to work to do the right thing and to give excellent care. In my many years of management, I will say there has been people that were really not meant to be in healthcare, despite giving many chances and support and change of shifts and things like that. Some people go into it for the wrong reason, but that's very far and few in between. And I mean,
even for those people, we can find a way to have empathy, because why? Because maybe they had some trauma, and I learned this from a lot of your content as well, or maybe there was something, right?
Yeah, everybody's meant to do a certain role. Yeah. I always tell the story of a
Totally.
clinical assistant that I had, who to this day we are still really good friends and in contact. And she had worked at the hospital I managed on med-surg unit ICU for her whole career. She was from that town, and she gave the best bedside care I have ever seen. Again, not a college graduate, and she was the best at bed baths, turning and repositioning, getting in out of bed, making sure they were fed, getting all those tests done before even 10 o'clock in the morning, right? But she had a very high expectations for the rest of her team. So what we did is I tried to give her more tasks around independent stuff, because that seemed to be where she thrived, did not do well on teams. But again, at the end of the day, it is a nursing floor and you have to be a part of a team. So months and months, I think even maybe a couple of years went by, and there was a lot of coaching, a lot of support, but she liked to throw around swears a lot too on the unit, and we had to work on her language. And she's just a wonderful person, but she was getting aggravated that not all the care that was being given was up to her standards. Like, she'd come out of a room and be like, who just changed the patient in room 10? That was an awful job. Do you think, would you want your mother to be changed like that? Like that type of stuff. And at the end of the day, chances. And she kind of said to me, like, I understand that you need to let me go. Like, I am not meant to be on a team like this. So what she did is we talked about her going into home health care, where she was the only aide at the house with that patient. And she is thriving in that environment and doing wonderful. She's happy. She feels like she fits in there. So like you said, everybody fits in somewhere. It's just a matter of making sure we identify it quickly, because someone could get hurt or other staff could be traumatized by her behavior, things like that. So,
I think it's, yeah, absolutely. The story makes a lot of sense. It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole from the book, Good to Great as well. Everyone's got to have the right seat on the bus. I love it. And I think that's what I was, earlier mentioning. Like, our rule is to ensure that we are trying to find reasons for understanding, the home health nurses. I mean, that's our Act One. Right now, we only do home health. Our product only works there because of the OSS documentation, and just we wanted to niche down because, I mean, there's so much happening and there's disruption everywhere in healthcare, and there are so many opportunities, and it's easy to get sidetracked and be trying to do everything. But, this is what our focus is. And I really wanted to, truly share that with you and, have you challenge us. So like I said, there's AI voice and ambient scribe and clinical documentation. I mean, of course, a little bit of patient engagement as well, because we want to teach the patient fall risks or anticoagulants and other things. And we create these nice animated videos that are personalized for them. My point is, our rule is we never auto submit to even the EMR, and a human always reviews. But awesome. I know that's not enough by itself. So I'm asking you directly, like, tear it apart. What are we missing, or what should scare us about what we're building?
Nothing comes to mind that I feel like you're completely missing. I mean, you guys are very thorough with your product, and again, having that nurse on your team and having healthcare people on your team is golden, because I'm sure during the building of all this, they had many suggestions that I would have given as well that you've already kind of tackled. I would say in the home healthcare sector, you have a human being going to a house to care for a patient, right? And they're alone. They don't have a manager to go to. They don't have a supervisor to go to, or another peer, right? Maybe they could text their manager or a peer, but it's not the same as having someone in the room with you, right? So do you guys have safeguards in place for like them to reach out when something with your product is not, they're confused or it's not working? I would say, like, making sure the employees don't feel abandoned using the product. So do you do that?
Well, right now I am the go-to person. I talk to, my home health agency administrators and director of nursing every now and then. And of course, we're a small team, so not right now as much of an infrastructure, but I like the suggestion. It's not just that their work's going to be checked. What if they get overwhelmed with all the features and functionalities and the changes? Is there a way for them to then get support and be like, okay, even though as much as it saves me time, I love it, but I'm confused here. What about this exception? Because there are going to be exceptions. And
yeah.
So no, I love that suggestion.
Yeah. And you're also, just keep in mind too, you have new grad nurses that go straight into home health, and then you have nurses and aides that have been doing this for 40, 50 years. There's two aspects there. There's two things that are important with the generations. The new nurses are going to be really tech savvy, right? I mean, my daughter's only in fifth grade, and they're having them do all their homework on a computer, which don't get me started on that, but they're learning younger and younger how to type, younger and younger how to edit, make videos, all that stuff, right? So your new grads coming in with less experience, what they're going to encounter is they're going to be great with probably the technology, but then they don't have the experience at the bedside, so they're going to want to be turning to a clinician for suggestions, or AI for suggestions, right? And they need to feel like they're getting truthful answers. And then when you have the other generation where they've been doing the care forever, and they're, know all the meds head to toe, and they, are very good at emergency situations. But in my experience, it's just a fact. This generation is not as savvy with tech. When we transitioned to the EHR Epic back many years ago on the MedSurg unit, it was a real struggle for the older generation of nurses. All due respect, because they're more of the handwritten note generation. They are, not I saw a lot of frustration when Epic came, and as pretty as it was on the screen, it was quite hard to use. And the training modules weren't that great. So just keeping in mind that every stage of experience is going to have different barriers and different anxieties around using AI to support their care.
Totally. And thank you for sharing that. And the way that we do this is that we had Kathy do the onboarding for all the nurses at this latest Houston-based customer that we onboarded. And I could see the difference because earlier, I mean, we've onboarded other customers, but I'm just so excited and passionate. And I'm like, look, it can do this, it can do that. But she had a very different approach. And in fact, she even said, because there were people like a nurse that had been in the industry for 15 years, and there were 2-year ones as well. And she said, let's go ahead and print this out. I mean, usually I don't print stuff, but that resonated, and they printed it out right away. So if they get stuck, they could...
Just so you know, nurses are huge printer outers, okay? I still print out, like I'm in school right now for a couple of things for my company, and I literally have this binder here that's all printouts, which I did not have to do. But we do it because everybody learns differently. Everybody's comfort level is different. So yeah.
And I think some other people could see how, I mean, the way that I prepped for this podcast was I put a lot of the deep research about you from the agents into Notebook LM, and I created a really nice graphic because I'm a very visual person, and I'm like, yeah, this 6-page document, fine, I can read it, but I would rather like see something. And then I put it in Claude as well. And then it gave me a nice, like block diagram, because the latest update that gives you that. And then I even created a presentation that I'm not going to use here, but it was for me, and it, made that idea. And I had an audio already, like the Notebook LM creates, those audio summaries. And then I was just listening to that. And that's how I was like getting in the mood to, okay, what is this about? Because, sometimes I do like 3 or 4 podcasts, in a fortnight. So yeah, no, that's totally understandable. Like there can be different ways that different people learn. And I think that I can understand, and totally we got to put more effort into onboarding and ensuring that the nurses are not just saving time, not just, able to like do their job and have somebody like a co-pilot as AI, but also, I mean, the way that they're learning, the generation that they belong to, or their preferences. Sometimes, there are exceptions as well. My mom orders, a lot of the stuff online all the time. But my dad, on the other hand, like he would learn something and then he would forget it the next day. So
totally.
It's
you're right.
Different for different people too.
Yeah, making that suggestion because, it really is true. I think it's the same actually with my parents. My mom is not very good on the tech side. She likes to do a lot of shopping though. She's able to do shopping, but my dad is more tech savvy. I think that also comes from like he worked a desk job in finance his whole life and used computers all the time. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom and she didn't. So, it's also exposure and experience, and everybody's levels are different. And at the end of the day too, like the onus isn't just on your company to make sure A, B, and C happens. It's on the leadership of these whole health agencies to make sure that they know every single one of their employees and their learning styles and what they need for support, and checking in with them very frequently on what they need for resources and extra support.
And that's a great point. And that's a good segue into what I want to talk about next, which is the trauma-informed technology design. So nobody in the industry talks about it. And we talk about like user experience, we talk about workflow integration, but we don't talk about what it means to deploy technology in environments where clinicians are already carrying like a lot of workplace trauma. Now, what would it look like if AI companies actually designed with that awareness? I mean, love to discuss that.
I know what it looks like, because when I was working with the last company, they actually had me train all of the staff in the company on trauma-informed language and approaches, because what we need to realize is when you are going to infiltrate healthcare and you're planning on working with all different types of specialties, let's use the example of psychiatric units, right? So if you're going to be doing a demo with 5 people in the room from a psychiatric hospital, and you are referring to the patients as difficult, or I'm not kidding. And I'm not saying this was what was happening at my company, at the company. It was what I'm trying to prevent. Saying things like, this product is really great because it will take away, the bad behavior that happens on your unit. These are not trauma informed words, right? So
Mm,
I went through a
I
training
see.
with all the staff on like, what is trauma? First of all, what does trauma look like for a patient, but also remembering that staff go to work and see anywhere from 3 to 10 or more traumatic things a day for many years. I know that because that was me. I can think of several shifts that I can remember the entire shift because it was so traumatic. And that's 25 years worth of it. So I just wanted to make
Wow.
sure that the company and the team, when they did these product demos, were really understanding the environment of psychiatry and really respectful of the mental illness and the struggles that these kids or adults have. And it was very successful because people after the training were like, oh my God, I really need to change how I refer to a patient with bipolar or a patient with depression, whatever. Even the suicide terms that people use nowadays is still incorrect. People are still talking about suicide in a completely incorrect way. So it's incredibly important. And, also having that trauma informed lens as a company that's going to work in AI and healthcare, you're going to get so much more credibility and respect from these organizations where they're like, wow, they really understand our patient population. As opposed to, oh my God, these people do not know how to talk to us. Like they know nothing about what we do. Again, another reason to have the healthcare people on your team so that we can kind
No,
of,
and thank you. I
yeah,
think this is a great suggestion, and I have to definitely go deeper into it and try to understand what are the different aspects and what's covered in it. But from what you explained, it sounds like something that everyone should learn. And what it's similar to, maybe some similarities, is what I've learned in like nonviolent communication and just generally reading some of the books like Crucial Conversation and
yeah.
some of those other things, and obviously through therapy and all of that as well, because I had a personal experience as well. I had a younger brother who I lost about a year and a half ago, and it was, I mean, he was struggling with mental illness as well, like not in the sense that you could see it. I mean, he went to
Mm,
IIT and he was just so fantastic.
functioning.
He was also in the US, but some addictions and other things, and we just lost him. And I
So
think,
sorry.
yeah, and that just told me more of how this field was just so important. And it's not more about being a category leader or winning, but it's also about like really providing the tools and the technologies that could create better access to a lot of the healthcare needs that our population has. But
Yeah.
last question for you. So if you could sit in a room where every healthcare company makes its product decisions and you had the authority to change one thing about how they build, test, and deploy into clinical environments, what would you change?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily changed because I would have to see if it's in place already, because maybe it would be, but I would want to ensure, just because my jam is mental health and safety, you know, I want to make sure that what you're putting out there, especially if it's a physical product, so something that's going to hang on a wall or go on a ceiling, I want to test it in person and be able to see that it cannot be ripped off a wall, that it doesn't have blinking lights, that it doesn't talk to you, because we already have patients that are in the hospital that are hallucinating or have, dementia, delirium, or confusion from whatever. The last thing they need is laying in a bed or sitting in a chair and looking up and thinking they're being monitored, and then they get paranoid and they escalate. So really making sure your product is not that noticeable, but always telling your patient, we use AI to do ABC, but we are not watching you. What I really want to see with AI companies is that they start using more thermal aspects. So instead of an actual camera looking at Joe sitting in his bed, I only really need to see that there's a body in that bed and it's moving and it just got out of bed and it's now on foot, right? Because now I'm not violating their personal HIPAA stuff. Like always make sure HIPAA is like top notch for your company, that you're not violating any patient rights. And again, like the ligature stuff, that nothing can hang, nothing can be pulled off, because I've had kids pull down equipment off the walls that, the strongest WWF wrestler couldn't do. But when you have anger in your body and your mind, you can rip anything. And I've had kids rip things down and use it as self-harming agents. So I would just say making sure your product is as safe as possible and does not, violate patient rights and dignity. No, I don't want to be laying in a Johnny in a bed and know that there's people at a computer watching me move around and whatnot. It's not necessary. I see some companies now that are still using the camera aspect with this big light flashing, and I'm like, come on, guys, the patients aren't going to be happy. Family's not going to be happy. So yeah, I would say that.
No, thank you. Thank you, Susie. And I have to tell you, this is exactly the conversation I needed to have. Not the one that makes me feel good about what we're building, but the one that makes us build better. And I think you've shared so many amazing things here, and especially this last point about safety as well. I think it's going to stick with me. And I think there's also about deploying technology in a broken culture doesn't fix anything. It just gives you
Yeah, you have
gives
to
you more efficient ways to damage.
Yeah, you have to make sure that your unit or your organization is healthy first. Psychological safety is huge. Your staff need to feel that they can make a mistake and come to you and tell you. If that isn't present before you now deploy a new technology, people are naturally not going to trust it, and they're not going to adopt it like they would on a healthy unit, because they're going to not go to their supervisor when they're like, oh, I think something's wrong. But if I go tell my manager, I'm going to get yelled at or whatever. Like that can't be the culture when you're going to be implementing these things.
Totally. And I think every founder in health tech needs to hear that, and every investor, every hospital system buying the next shiny platform. And, for us as well, at Copper Digital, we made that decision early on. Like I mentioned, we would never sort of auto submit things to EMRs. A human always reviews, and we build that rule because we believe that nurses' judgment is sacred, and AI's job is to support that judgment, not replace it. And after this conversation, I'm taking many more important nuggets that I am going to share with my team. And I think I understand even more and deeply why all of this matters. I mean, it's not just a product feature, it's a cultural commitment. It's just a culture built into code, I would say. And yeah, for everyone listening, if you're building technology for healthcare, if you're leading a hospital or a home health agency, if you're a nurse who's been burnt by one or more systems that was supposed to help you, and find Susie Branagan. She's at susiebranaganconsulting.com, and she's doing the work that the entire industry needs, but most of us are too afraid to ask for it. So Susie, you call yourself AI's clinical conscience. I hope you'll be ours too.
Absolutely.
I'm Arvind Sareen. Thank you for listening, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for having me.